Florida State has found its next potential starting quarterback. There might be a quarterback competition coming into this spring and fall camp for Florida State and Mike Norvell, but the Seminoles landed Thomas Castellanos, Boston College transfer quarterback. We talked about him plenty on Hear the Spear and across our YouTube videos, but now it is official. He had his visit on Wednesday evening during our show, and then just about an hour or so later ends up picking Florida State. And now you look at the offense and what it could start to look like. You can start trying to put some pieces together and everything, and it all starts there at the quarterback. And now Florida State bringing in a dual threat quarterback, starting to make you feel like the days of Jordan Travis a little bit with what Florida State is going to try to get back into doing moving forward. Austin, first, your take on this. We've talked plenty about him, but now we can really start trying to build what this offense is going to look like going into 2025.
Yeah, obviously, I talked about it on Wednesday saying, I was liking this more and more, the potential of it. Now that it's here, it makes a ton of sense. And like I said on Wednesday night, he fits Gus Malzahn's offense. They obviously have a lot of familiarity going back to their days at UCF when Castellanos was a freshman before he transferred to Boston College. And I think if you get the 2023 version of Castellanos with that running threat and build in some of those passing techniques and improvements he got this year, I think that's a solid quarterback. Now, there's a couple of downsides. Obviously, he's a smaller guy. He listed on PFF at 5'9" and 195 pounds. So you basically got an even smaller Kyler Murray back there. But this is going to fit what this offense, at least on paper, what it wants to do. A lot will depend on what the offensive line builds into the next few weeks. But I think this is solid.
I think the big thing here, too, you have 2 years of eligibility as well with Castellanos. I think that's something that we should keep an eye on just to see what Florida State ends up doing moving forward, even after this next upcoming season, because a lot can change, of course. But he comes in, like you said, already recruited by Gus Malzahn as a quarterback. And then also, too, if you go back all the way to 2020, I believe in March of 2020, when he visited Florida State and there was recruitment there. He wasn't being recruited as a quarterback, but he was being recruited more of an athlete, primarily at that wide receiver position. But yeah, he's a smaller guy. Going through some of his stats, though, in 2023, this is where, I think FSU fans, if this was in the 2024 offseason, you said, oh my gosh, Thomas Castellanos, he could be coming to me, I think fans would be ecstatic, actually, after you lost a guy like Jordan Travis. But going to his 2023 stats, had a 57.3 completion percentage, 2,248 yards on air, 15 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. But then you look at his rushing game and what he brings to the table: 215 carries, 1,113 yards, and 13 touchdowns. He actually became Boston College's first player in history with 2,000 plus passing yards and 1,000 plus rushing yards in a single season. So this guy is a versatile quarterback that can move the ball down the field. And, I'll talk about it here in a minute, but also too, with what you have and with Florida State's offensive line, you need a guy that can move around the pocket and make things whenever there's nothing there and it's falling apart, which we've seen in the years past with this offensive line that Florida State has shown. You need a guy that can make magic happen. And that's what Florida State had with Jordan Travis. I don't think they have that currently on their roster. And this is where you're able to bring in a guy that can get you down the field. And that's something Florida State right now just simply needs more than ever.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people will freak out about the 14 interceptions in 2023, but at least in 2024, he did take a step forward as a passer, completed over 61% of his passes, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 8 games before Bill O'Brien moved to a more pro-style kind of quarterback. And I thought the big thing was he only had 7 turnover-worthy plays at all last year compared to the 24 he had in 2023. So we've seen he can take care of that football. And if he can bring back that rushing dynamic that we saw in 2023, because Bill O'Brien did not want him running at all last year. I think he only, what did he end up with? 280 rushing yards. That's just not who Castellanos is best utilized as. He's best utilized as a dual threat quarterback that can use the read option, even use the speed option at times, QB draws. That's how you can get him moving the best. And I think Gus Malzahn and even Mike Norvell can get the best out of them, because we saw Mike do it with Jordan Travis.
Let's look at some Florida State stats against him. I mean, or should I say, look at Castellanos' stats against Florida State's defense. He went 30 of 49 and 411 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And this is combined with 2023 and 2024. He also had 30 carries, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. This guy was a menace to Florida State's defenses and his days up there. And just the truth about Castellanos, I think, to me, because I'm seeing the reaction from FSU Twitter and fans, a lot of fans looking at other names. I mean, like a guy like Hayden Salter as well, which we've kept a close eye on too, and trying to find a dual threat quarterback. And I was mentioning on the show too last night, Florida State, should they play patient? Should they rush this? Should they try to grab a quarterback early like this? And I think there's pros and cons from both sides on this. And I think the pro here is that you've got your guy, you got your signal caller, and you could start building that offense around, because right now, what the transfer portal, it's hot. There's so many names jumping in there. And there's also guys that are committing quick. Like some guys are picking their next location pretty quickly. And I think that's one of the answers for Florida State to get Castellanos in, is to start building that personnel around him as quickly as possible. You know, Florida State bringing in a lot of visits, including offensive linemen, which we'll talk about heavily here on the YouTube channel moving forward. But I think that's a pro there that you get from bringing Castellanos in and garnering that commitment pretty early, VZ.
Yeah, as I just mentioned, got to build this offensive line. You like to think you have some talent in the wide receiver room, just got to see it developed. But definitely some talent in that tight end room with Landon Thomas and potentially Amari Williams if he stays there. I know Mike said they're going to try and back out a defensive end this spring, but you like what you have there. You like what you have in the running back room with Cam Davis, Sam Singleton, a couple other guys like the true freshman they just signed. There's definitely talent on this offense if they can develop it. But it really is just going to depend on this offensive line, because as Dustin mentioned a few times last night, it was the worst offensive line in power conference football, and that just can't be a successful offense with that.
No, and no quarterback can be successful there, no matter how good they are, except maybe if you are Jordan Travis, I should say. But yeah, Florida State now will add into this quarterback room that already holds Brock Glenn and then a true freshman in Kevin Sperry coming in, who previously was committed to Oklahoma and committed to Florida State before Gus Malzahn became official to be Florida State's next offensive coordinator. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this attracts guys in the transfer portal, in my opinion, and what the message is going to be to build around Thomas Castellanos, because you want to bring in some targets in the wide receiver room, which I think to me have some ups, but there's more of, you got to find answers going into the 2025 year than what we were thinking about prior going into really 2023. And then this last year we had some question marks about that wide receiver room, and we thought Malik Benson was going to help carry that, and that just didn't end up being the case. So there's a lot of work that has to go in order to me to feel like Castellanos can really take this team into being an 8+ win program that I think Mike Norvell needs to have in order to keep his job safe moving forward. But yeah, good pickup here, I think, overall for Florida State. I think, like I said, fans are maybe hit or miss on it. I think it's a positive one. I think he's a really special athlete, and I think it will show too, if Florida State's offensive line doesn't get it turned around pretty quickly under Herb Hand, Austin, I think we'll see just how dynamic and elusive he can be to keep the offense out there on the field.